All right, hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's go ahead and get this show on the road here. All right, so today for the Writestream, we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. What I'm also going to try to do today is create a little bit more of a concrete format because live streams lately I've been going way over the time that I intended. I want an hour. I don't want to do more than an hour and a half at a time. Because it just gets to be a little bit too much. And it's a little bit too much time for my family to deal with. So that's one of the things that hold on, I got a live preview going on there. So that's one of the things that I want to fix as I go here, is making sure that I'm doing it in the right amount of time, and also that I'm actually focusing on the topic at hand. Because what happened last week is people wanted to talk about conspiracy theories and politics rather than writing. So one of the things I may do going forward is start up a second stream, the noise stream, to just talk about random political stuff or entertainment stuff rather than these writing focused topics, because I really want these to be very topic focused. It's better, it's better for me. It's better for the audience. It makes it less annoying for people who aren't here to hear me say anything about, I don't know, some random political topic. So that's what we're going to do going forward. So the first thing I want to talk about is just updates and things like that. So a month ago, my wife had a child. So she'll be 1 month old tomorrow. It's been a very, very good experience so far. The problem with little kids is that they're super attention. They need a lot of attention. And that's just the way that they are. So a lot of my time has been eaten up, of course, caring for a child. That means I think I've written like a grand total of 4,000 words in the last month, which I bring that up because sometimes in life, there's other things that take priority over sitting down and doing work. And of course, I've managed to try to keep up a little bit of content on the channel as we go here. So the writing stuff has ended up kind of being a little bit on the back burner. I should have a brand new story for people who are on Subscribestar. You'll get it for free. It's a science fiction, sci-fi horror story that'll be out. Hopefully by the end of the week, it'll be done. I'm going to publish it on Amazon. If it gets to be the length that I want, I might publish it on Amazon for 99 cents. But I can tell you, if you're watching, it'll end up in an anthology, one of my shorter fiction anthologies. A little bit further down the road. So if you don't want to pay for it, or you're not on Subscribestar, you'll probably be able to get it free somewhere along the line. It'd just be something up, another little story for 99 cents in a different genre to kind of explore interest in those different areas. So that's what I've basically been doing with writing. The other thing is my daughter has what some people call like a infant reflux or silent reflux, which is she has a weak lower esophageal sphincter, and most babies, if their stomach is too full, they just kind of spit up, they throw up. My son was that way. He was what we called a happy spitter. He'd spit up milk. It never really bothered him, and that's not the case with Aurelia. With her, she's really miserable and like in pain a lot of the time, and that's basically unless she's upright. So I spent a huge amount of time basically holding an infant over the last month, and sitting in a chair holding the infant so she can try to sleep, and so my wife can sleep too, because this obviously will interrupt the baby's sleep, which interrupts my wife's sleep since she's the primary caregiver, which is natural because she has the right equipment, in other words, mammary glands, in order to see to the needs of the baby as far as nutrition and comfort and those things in general. So I've been holding a baby, which means what else am I going to do? It's really hard for me to read a book holding her, because you're kind of holding her like this. I don't know if y'all can see me, kind of holding her like this. So for me to read a book, I've been able to read some smaller books, kind of like this, like, kind of read them. I ended up playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII on the Switch, and the reason is the controllers can be separate. So the Joy-Cons, which usually attach, you can have them as separate controllers. They're too small for my hands by a lot. Like, I have very big hands. My hands they're big, and they're large enough to operate Baroque lute and things like that. So they don't feel good in my hands, which means I usually want to use a bigger controller to play Switch games. But they're actually kind of a godsend for that because I can actually hold the controllers. My daughter's not really bothered by noise, and I could play a game on the TV. I bought Final Fantasy VII because I hadn't played it since the 1990s. So I hadn't played it in a long, long time, other than like the beginning, like maybe a couple times on an emulator. So I hooked that up, or I had bought it, and a lot of nights I just hold my daughter for 4 hours at a time, and I just played that game. And so it's been pretty cool to go back and play a classic JRPG and see if Final Fantasy VII really holds up the way most people think it does. And it does hold up for the most part. It's probably still not my favorite Final Fantasy game, but it definitely does a lot of things well and does a lot of things well with the story, and it approaches the story in a very non-typical fashion for most games, which is you have a character that, rather than like most RPGs, your main character is kind of an everyman character like Vaughn from Final Fantasy XII. But in a lot of JRPGs, you sometimes get these paragon characters, and that's kind of what Cloud is. He's like a fully developed, fully powerful character that still grows, and they reveal things about his backstory through some very interesting means for the time, which was like cutscenes where they flash in between them to kind of indicate that there's something wrong with Cloud's memory, which sets up for some bigger reveals later on in the plot. So it does hold up. It's pretty good. The Switch port, I will tell you, is good, except it actually doesn't look as good as the classic PlayStation version did on a CRT TV. This is a thing with porting old games, particularly games from the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 era. Those games in particular tend to look pretty bad on really big, LCD TVs, which is what I've got. I'll talk about Final Fantasy IX in just a second, Brecklin. But so it looks good, except you have these beautiful painted environments, but basically 7, 8, and 9 have the same sort of approach, which you have a pre-rendered background, which is painted or rendered in a 3D software, and then you have animated 3D characters. Well, the animated 3D characters really stand out from the background because they have anti-aliasing and are essentially rendered at a higher resolution than they were back in the day. So there's this weird effect where all the items and the characters kind of pop off the background in a way that wasn't nearly as apparent when you played on the original PlayStation on a CRT TV. Back then, things weren't anti-aliased, which means you didn't have multiple passes to kind of average lines. So you got these jaggies. The characters really blended in with the background, and you had a much more kind of impressionist effect with the older games on a CRT rather than what you get with the newer games or the older games on a newer display, newer video card setup, is you get something that's crisp in kind of the wrong ways. So the character models look incredibly simple, chunky. There were some problems with the art design where like there was one team wanted to go one direction, one team wanted, so in the battle scenes, they're rendered kind of in more mature photorealistic fashion, and otherwise they're rendered almost, they're rendered kind of like chibis otherwise, kind of like cute things with weird little fat arms. So it's, I want to talk about this game a little bit to kind of intro and transition into talking about conspiracy theories in fiction. And then of course I did mention this. I want to end every stream with a little bit of a logic discussion, just for a little bit of fun. And today I'm going to talk about what's called survivor bias. Anyway, with Final Fantasy VII, it looks a little weird because of that. But I wanted to remind people that you can actually, if you want really good PlayStation ports, you can actually play them on the Vita. So on the PlayStation Store for the PlayStation Vita, there's all these PS1 classics, and they look actually really accurate on the PlayStation Vita. You would not think it, but because it's rendering it, it's basically running it through an emulator and rendering it just like it used to look. And because this is a smaller screen, and back in the day you probably played on a smaller screen, the PlayStation 1 stuff actually looks better on the PlayStation Vita than it does on the newer Switch hardware, and that has to do with that kind of blurring of the older, crappier graphics. It looks more impressionist. is what I'd say. So you see kind of the impression of what's there, and you kind of fill in the gaps. You imagine a little bit of the detail that's missing, rather than seeing something in really stark detail where all the flaws are very, very obvious. But either way, Final Fantasy VII, very imaginative, and is also, it starts off in this city called Midgar that's kind of like Alita Battle Angel, which the manga came out before Final Fantasy VII, so maybe they were drawing some influence there. You have a top level where like the rich people live, and then you have the slums underneath. So it's a great setup at the beginning of this. But transitioning to what we're talking about today, I was, it's always about seeing the upside with things, right? Because a lot of people can complain about having to stay up late with their kids. Their kids aren't feeling good, or there's a problem, all of that. If you spin it right, there's a positive side to everything. So the positive side is I almost never give myself enough time to do the things I like, which is to read and play games. And so when you're forced to sit with an infant for hours at a time, I've ended up being very blessed to be able to spend a month enjoying more consumption of media than what I normally allow myself to do. I'm usually listening to books while I'm doing other things, or reading as quickly as I can, while I'm going to bed. So it's been, it's been a blessing. Likewise, the Joy-Cons, which I don't really like, turns out those are really good because I can hold them like this. And that's pretty good. Now, Final Fantasy VII has a conspiracy in it, right? And the conspiracies, there's actually multiple conspiracies. They involve one of the most interesting ways that you could present a conspiracy is things are not the way that we think they are, and somebody else has caused it. That's the essence of a conspiracy or a conspiracy theory in stories. And so that's really where I want to start that discussion today. So anyway, that's my updates. The Writestream will continue every Wednesday at 6 p.m. To 9 p.m. Eastern. Drop by and say hi, especially if there's a topic you like. And I'm going to do all the comment response, all the chat response at about 6:30 or 6:40 after I get done giving my intro to the topic. So here's the basic things of a conspiracy theory. So a conspiracy theory involves some malicious force or group of people, a cabal of elites that are manipulating the perception of reality, either the perception of events or perpetrators, and they're doing it to create some outcome that is not understood by the people whom they're manipulating. And so conspiracies can be big or they can be small. You can have a conspiracy in a tiny village, or you can have a conspiracy that's worldwide. And how we see this in fiction is usually you have a character that starts to question the reality that they're placed in and starts to uncover the truth until they get to a point where they have to either step over a line into a possible place of insanity or step back and accept that, basically accept the world as it is. And you can see this event happen in lots of different movies. You can see it in the Da Vinci Code. You can see it especially in a great conspiracy movie, JFK by Oliver Stone, which is it's a long movie, but it's so good the first time you watch it. And there is this, there's a couple scenes I think with Kevin Costner where it's like if you go any further, you start to really, you're implicating, like you're taking a dangerous step. Of course, The Matrix is a conspiracy theory movie as well. And the way that this shows up in The Matrix is literally a choice. You take the red pill and you're going to see reality as it is, or you take the blue pill and everything goes back and you choose not to go any further and not to try to find out any more of the truth because there's a consequence to knowing the truth. This is another part of the conspiracy. So why do these cabals hide the truth? In most fiction, and indeed with most conspiracy theories in the real world, it's because there's a thought that if they were to present the truth, the public would not understand it, or they reject it, or they rebel against them, or there's going to be some hidden or direct benefit to them that people would be alarmed by. Someone asks, would a coup trying to overthrow a corrupt ruler still be a conspiracy? Yes, but that's another thing is the people operating the conspiracy, obviously they themselves may not think of themselves as the bad guys. And you can have a conspiracy that's a good thing. So spy movies often involve conspiracies or conspiracy theories. And so one is that you may have a good guy who's trying to keep a secret, keep a national secret because of the implications of it. And you may have a bad guy who's trying to get that secret out, or you may have those things flipped. If you read the graphic novel The Watchmen, or watch the movie, I'm not a fan of the movie, but it's pretty close to the story. It's actually pretty close. There's a couple things I don't like about it, but the entire movie is about a conspiracy, or the entire book is about a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy theory about who's doing this, why are they doing it, what are the nefarious things, and then you figure out that it's basically some kind of conspiracy to get the USSR and the United States to work together to have peace because they're going to blow each other up. And there's many other ones as well. Spy movies tend to do this pretty well. Let me see if I can think of any others. There's a whole bunch. A great one, of course, is actually the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and Patrick Stewart, where the guy who's the conspiracy theorist is presented as insane. And as you learn more, and as the story progresses, you realize he's not crazy. It's everybody else that's not actually understanding reality, that all the crazy conspiracy theories he has are actually reality, and it's everybody else that has the wool over their eyes. And so I really like that movie because it turns the tables on the idea of the conspiracy theory. I have a conspiracy theory story that I'll probably begin on after I finish this sci-fi horror story and kind of get that out to people, called Flat Earth. And the basic idea of Flat Earth is the main character works for the NSA. And he's a data miner for the NSA. Basically, he collects information on people and programs algorithms that sort people into categories for investigation and spying and targeting by the government. All the stuff that Edward Snowden really talked about. But he's like the protagonist, and he doesn't view any of that as bad. The department he's in, they're legitimately trying to find, terrorists and identify bad guys. But he gets hired into another secret department that is running a psyop, and he has the same job, which is to program algorithms, and essentially, you program bots that scour the internet and run all these different little tests on people by presenting them conspiracy theory videos or other things. And if they like the conspiracy theory video, you kind of bring them further. It basically uses long tail marketing tactics to bring people in a categorization of that they're into conspiracy theories. And he doesn't quite know why they're identifying all these conspiracy theorists because it's like classified information, but the flat Earth videos are the ones that they identify. They're the main ones that he's using to identify people. And of course, his best friend is a flat earther. He believes the Earth is flat, and often tells him that he's the one who's crazy because he thinks the Earth is round and he's never seen the curvature of the Earth and this kind of stuff. And of course, as he gets deeper into the story, he starts to question his reality, basically that the Earth might actually be flat. And that, he might be living in a simulation. That something is really, really off, and he doesn't know what. And I have some interesting ways that the story will go from there. But that's the basic idea of that. Jared says the Jason Bourne series has many conspiracies. It is a great conspiracy theory one. Let's actually talk about the execution of at least the first Bourne movie. The Bourne, what was it called? The Bourne Identity? Yes. Because there's the Bourne Supremacy. There's a bunch of them. Anyway. So in the Bourne Identity, you have a guy who doesn't remember who he is. But he gets put in these stressful situations where he realizes he has these incredible skills, where a guy tries to kill him and he fights him back with like a ballpoint pen and takes disarms him and rips the gun apart and doesn't know how he does this stuff. And as he begins to recover his memory, he realizes that he's basically a bad guy and he was wanting to run away from it, and he's part of like a secret organization. So the Bourne Identity. It's a good movie, but it's a very classic use of amnesia. Amnesia is a technique that lots of writers have used. Robert Zelazny began the Amber books with amnesia, and here's the advantage of amnesia, and this was used in Final Fantasy VII, right? The advantage of amnesia is you can have a character be fully powered up, in essence, have some amount of power, but still there's a lot of story to uncover. So rather than having to begin at the beginning and have a bunch of boring stuff, you begin right in the middle of the action and you backfill that stuff by having the character rediscover their past. That's the advantage of having amnesia in a story, is that it allows for a character that's very fully developed or mature, very skillful, to not feel like a Mary Sue. And he doesn't feel like a Mary Sue because he doesn't really know why he's powerful, but he knows that there's a reason and he has to uncover it. And it also allows you to create reveals. There's a couple different ways that you can do plot points. One is you can have an event happen, and that changes the course of the story. The other one is you can have a revelation. So revelations can be really easy to do if you have amnesia. You just come to a place, you can have them just remember something kind of spontaneously, and then they have a revelation, and that is its own focus and its own plot point. And that's really what the Bourne Identity does. As he proceeds through this long set of conflicts, it's really to discover who he is and why he has these skills and who's the bad guy, and realizes he has a crisis and gets to experience that crisis again at the end of the movie. So this is kind of interesting about the Bourne Identity. The inciting incident happens in two places. It happens at the beginning of the movie and creates the story. But it happens again at the end of the movie when Jason Bourne rediscovers his memory and rediscovers the reasons for why he did these things. And so you get the impact kind of twice. It's the only way that you can do that is with amnesia, is to have that thing happen kind of two times, to have an inciting incident that's also the climax. Another one that does it is actually Memento, though it's not really a conspiracy theory movie. Ghost in the Shell is a good one from Nitaku. So Ghost in the Shell is an anime that I really liked from the 90s. I like these subtitled just as a, by the way, in general, I prefer subtitles for Japanese animation as opposed to dubs. There's a couple reasons for that. First one is the quality of voice acting is often bad for the English dubs. Maybe that upsets some people considering some of the controversy with Funimation right now, but usually it's fairly bad, sometimes good. But it's also inaccurate because what will happen is somebody will translate it for dubbing and will put it in a way that's more idiomatic for a typical American English speaker, and that may not actually convey the meaning of what it said in Japanese. So if you watch Ghost in the Shell, the Japanese subtitled version, or you know Japanese, the story is a lot more coherent than the dubbed version. In the dubbed version, they change a lot of things to be more idiomatic that make the plot difficult to follow. But at the heart of Ghost in the Shell, you have a conspiracy theory. You have some mysterious hacker, and one example is you have a guy who's a trash collector going along doing these phone call hacks where he's phoning in and transmitting this data, and he doesn't realize that he's had his own memory altered. So the world, not only is the world different from how he thinks it is, his own memory is different from how he thinks it is. And Nitaku says, I always like the conspiracy theories in the cyberpunk genre too. Yeah. So let me go ahead and with that introduction, let me go ahead and get to some of the chat. I'm going to go back up to the top and try to get the early parts of the chat. So if I miss some of them because they came in before the stream, I apologize in advance. That happens sometimes, is the chat will erase anything that happened before the stream actually begins. Swords and Shotguns. What do you think about a spy thriller where a rogue agent fights his way against the government in order to save the frogs from the water and becoming becoming gay. I don't know. It seems silly, but you can do it. It sounds like a good comedy. Here's another thing about conspiracy theories. Before I go on, why are they appealing? Let's see if we can answer that question before I get to more chats. Conspiracy theories are appealing because they're an inbuilt mystery, and mystery really drives readers to turn the page. If they have to figure out what is really happening or what actually happened, they're really willing to turn the page. Now, how this applies to fantasy, because some people are asking questions about fantasy. If you read some Brandon Sanderson series, what you'll notice is they start very interesting, and then they proceed to get rather boring as they go on. So they start more interesting than they end. And that's not because Brandon Sanderson's a bad writer. It's not because he's bad at plot per se. It's because he writes these very, very complex settings with complex rule sets. And at the beginning, you're presented indirectly with some exposition on how the world works. And so you keep turning the page to try to figure out what the hell is happening and what things are. Like if you're reading Mistborn, you're like, what's this ash from the sky? Who's the Lord Ruler? And by the end of the book, you have most of those questions answered, and you have kind of some new ones asked for the next book in the series. By the time you get to the last book, there's not as much reason to turn the page. And if you aren't as invested in the characters, like one of the things I realized basically with this third Stormlight book, Oathbringer, is I really didn't like the characters in the Stormlight Archive. Almost none of them I liked by the end. And that makes me not really care about the outcomes. What I liked, the characters I liked in the first book did and acted in ways that made me lose interest in them. Same thing with Wheel of Time. By the third book. And once you had kind of uncovered the conspiracy of the whole story by the third book of Stormlight Archive, there's just, you're left with just characters you don't care that much about and plot that doesn't matter that much, right? Or just isn't that interesting. So it's really hard to blend those together. That's an interesting thing. Maybe I'll call that like the Sanderson effect. So people love to uncover mysteries. That's why mystery books are called page turners, or something like the Da Vinci Code is a page turner. You got to figure out what happens next. And it's also very appealing, this idea that there's hidden knowledge, esoteric versus exoteric knowledge. And the quest for esoteric knowledge, it's essentially satanic. It begins the Bible, right? You have this snake say, if you eat of this fruit, the knowledge of good and evil, you'll become like God. And so Eve eats the fruit basically to become like God, but it's to gain knowledge. So the danger is the esoteric knowledge. And so what Satan, as the snake, is presenting to Eve is, I will give you esoteric knowledge in exchange for you doing sin. And then the Adam and Eve figure out the terrible consequences of that. So it's an interesting thing, and that's very influential of Gnostics. Gnostics want this idea of esoteric knowledge kind of hidden away. The problem with esoteric knowledge or like the Gnostic religion is that it dies with the people who hold the secrets. And so it just ends up being an eternal mystery. We're not really sure what the Knights Templar knew because they were wiped out so quickly by the King of France. All right. Silver Silk says, I think conspiracy theory has taken on a new meaning in the modern era. It used to be that rulers had conspiracies, and now it's some crazy person sees patterns everywhere. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what it means, but conspiracy really just means a hidden plan, right? So when you think about conspiracy in a story, that's the start of it. Let's see here. There are actually 34 degrees of Freemasonry. Nolan Ryan is number 34. If you rearrange the letters of Freemasonry, it spells Nolan Ryan. Coincidence? It doesn't. You don't. Nolan Ryan, you don't get from Freemasonry, but that's cute. I like it. Let's see here. Darth Kilhoun. If we write a conspiracy theory, we can do it as a minor background thing. Like in my alt history, there's a conspiracy that Churchill survived, while officially he died in a sunken submarine. That's interesting, yeah. So that can be a little bit of a backstory, like the idea that Hitler lived and escaped. I think they had that in Archer. One of the characters was Hitler's clone or something. Jefferson Johnson. Could you get a swing for your daughter, or is she too little? Some can be adjusted to be more upright and help ease the symptoms. Wouldn't leave her in it all night, though. Yeah, it's not good to leave her in it all night, but she has to be pretty upright, not just like leaning back. And the problem with, this is just a thing, the problem with leaving infants upright is they can roll off and do weird things. So it's always a challenge. We don't do swings in general because it's too much stim, I think there's too much stimulation of babies. It's just a thought. We put babies in swings. We do everything except, the swing is there to mimic holding the baby. So the most natural thing, a little bit of appeal to nature here, the most natural thing is to hold them. And honestly, my daughter won't, she does sleep best if she's being held. She needs that comfort. Nitaku says, in one of my stories, I used being thrust into a conspiracy as a call to adventure in the hero's journey. Absolutely. They did that in Matrix. He gets confronted by the Agent Smith, and then because he's on a search to uncover the truth, essentially to scare him, and he has to either turn back or go on when he gets the red pill, blue pill. So absolutely being thrust into a conspiracy is good. My PSP is broken and I lost the charger. If they had made the PS Vita have a TV tuner like the original PSP, it would have been the Switch. It would have been super successful. This is like the best system nobody bought. Is the PlayStation Vita. It has an amazing game library. Every PlayStation 1 game, which is a great game library. A whole bunch of PSP games, which is a great game library, and then a bunch of indie titles. So the PlayStation Vita is a very overlooked system. It's great. Do you think there was a conspiracy at Lucasfilm and Disney to oust Lucas from Star Wars, considering they didn't use his treatments? I don't think it was a conspiracy. Yes. So the answer is yes. I don't think it was all that secret. And I think Lucas kind of knew it from the beginning. He was just like, I'll sell it and take my money and do other things with it because I'm done with Star Wars. And of course they didn't want to use his treatments because that's not their goal. Their goal isn't to make George Lucas movies. Their goal is to buy an IP and milk it into oblivion. First of all, and second of all, to use it as a vehicle for their own messaging, which is what we've seen. You see various amounts of messaging put into these IPs which they didn't create. You see it with modern Marvel comics too. Take old heroes, turn them gay. Like it's nonsense when you stop and think about it. But yeah, I think that's what they wanted to do. I don't think they didn't buy Star Wars specifically to get rid of Lucas. They bought it because they wanted to make a bunch of money and turn the biggest franchise in the world into a messaging and money-making machine. And so they're going to milk it until there's literally nothing left of it. Then they'll reboot it, which is what they do with everything. So I would say in 5 to 10 years, I mean, depending if Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, does poorly, they'll reboot it in 5 years. If it does well, they'll reboot in 10 years. And by reboot, I mean they will remake A New Hope. They'll remake Star Wars 77 as a brand new start of a franchise. They will reboot Star Wars. It is an inevitability that they will reboot and remake it. At this point, I think the odds are definitely heavily in the reboot remake, because Episode 7 was itself kind of it was a requel. It was a reboot sequel. Ash, do you think Franz Kafka does a good job of using conspiracies in his stories and narrative? I don't know how to answer that because I'm not sure who Franz Kafka is off the top of my head. It's probably someone I should know. I may not have read any stories by him, or it may have been so long I don't remember. But I don't. That's my honest response. Thoughts on the conspiracy from Full Metal Alchemist? Oh, I like that one. Yeah. So this is this one where you have basically the head of state is actually a created alchemical being that was designed to infiltrate the government, and everybody's being manipulated towards some giant outcome. I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like to make some dude immortal I don't remember exactly where it went because I stopped watching it at some point. Hunt for Red October is a good one. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Can you talk a little about writing for a fantasy audience? Absolutely. So, you could talk for hours about writing for a fantasy audience. There's different fantasy audiences, and different parts of the audience or different sections of the audience are into different things as far as story and what they want. The main reason that you want to write fantasy from a technical, this is kind of fantasy. Here's a fantasy book. This is also a fantasy book, right? The main reason you want to write fantasy from a technical perspective is that when you have, you can think of it as rule sets if you want to, when you have limitations to reality that are a little bit different from normal, that creates many more plot varieties and many more types of characters than you would normally get if you were to set it like in a contemporary American or British setting or wherever you happen to be, even with a foreign country, like if you set it in Sri Lanka or something. You have many, many different kinds of variations that can happen. What are fantasy fans into? Well, they're into those variations. They're into the setting, which is why they read fantasy. If all they wanted was characters that were like them, they wouldn't be reading fantasy. They'd be reading, Nora Roberts books or something, right? What they're into is characters that are a little bit like them, but are very different from them, or have a very different world that they have to tackle. They want worlds that are interesting for themselves, and they want characters that are interesting because they live in those weird and interesting worlds. And then they like plots that are unexpected because the world is interesting and different. So you get unexpected plots, different kinds of characters, and then of course you get settings that are interesting for themselves. And now if you're to pick any of those three things, setting, characters, plot. Fantasy, the setting is extremely important. For most things, it's the characters are more important than the setting. But I will say, if you really want readers to stick around in a series, it needs to be about the characters. The reason people like the original Star Wars movies is because of the characters, not because of the plots. The setting is extremely important as well, but the plots are far less important than the characters. So make sure that the setting is good and interesting, and then make sure that the characters are really relatable and lovable, or very hateable. They almost have to be caricatures sometimes if you really want to pull it off. I try not to make my characters caricatures, but you want them to be very squarely, very bluntly themselves, if you want people to very quickly know whether they like a character and whether they want to root for it. They need to be very interesting. And that's the main thing about fantasy audiences. Now, beyond that, there's lots of little subgenres that different people are into. Obviously, if you're writing military fantasy, that audience is going to be more into discussions of arms, armor, tactics, and what the results of a battle would be if you had different systems. So one of the things, I don't have Needle Ash here, but one of the things in my book, Needle Ash, people really liked is that, I started with, a late medieval Gothic or Italian kind of setup for an army, and then we add a limited amount of magic into that, and it changes the way that you engage in battle tactics. Once you have magic on the field, things get very different. So you start with what's standard, and then what's interesting would be, you have mages, and mages, of course, they can like cast fireballs and blow up. It's like having a mobile cannon, right? In the medieval period, it changes warfare quite significantly. And so all these different possibilities, just in the form of magic, create a much more interesting and engaging scene. All right, let's keep going with conspiracies. What are good ways to foreshadow the truth behind a conspiracy? Technically, you can learn a lot from mystery writers in this case. So if you read mystery writers, they'll leave in details that are interesting. So I'm going to go with a popular children's book, the first Harry Potter book, because J.K. Rowling's really a mystery writer. That's one of the reasons that Harry Potter was so successful, is that it used the mystery book format. And the very first book has a conspiracy. The conspiracy is this philosopher's stone. So no one should go into this wing unless they want to die a very, very painful death. Now, if you think about that, I don't know if that's an exact quote, but Dumbledore just says that matter of factly. It serves two things. First of all, it's a piece of whimsical fantasy because Harry Potter is in a place that he hasn't been, and here's a ancient wizard basically talking very matter of factly about dying a very painful death. So it's something that is weird or uncanny. It's the presence of the uncanny. But it serves a second one, which is it foreshadows a conspiracy. Why can't you go into that wing? What is there that they don't want people to see? And so that begins the mystery plot. And they're like, oh, well, there's a 3-headed dog called Fluffy, and then what's in there? And they finally figure out, oh, it's the Philosopher's Stone. Another detail she has is Hagrid picks up a little bag out of a vault. And so because you don't see the object, you ask the question, what's in the bag? And he says, best not tell anyone about this. That indicates a conspiracy. And so those are both good ways of foreshadowing it. So it's a good technical execution, especially for a children's book. And that's one of the reasons people got so sucked into it. That a lot of people don't realize is that it's because it was a mystery book format. Let's see here. Flat Earth theory is for stupid people. You'll find out when you read the book. It's not about, it's about identifying people who reject, who are like resistant to certain kinds of evidence. Another thing, just as an aside with Flat Earth, I realized like some arguments that I make that I'm like, this is really obvious. Like you can go to the seashore and you can see the curvature of the Earth, right? Like in California, you can go and you can look out across the ocean and see the tip of like Catalina Island. And as you get closer, you see the island literally rise out of the ocean because it's on, that's the curvature of the Earth, and you're seeing it below the horizon. You also see ships disappear over the horizon. So I lived in a place called El Segundo, which is a little town right by LAX. And so it had these huge oil tankers would come in, and there was a big oil refinery there, the El Segundo Chevron oil refinery. And so these tankers, you could see them with your naked eye far out in sea, and you'd see just the top of the boat, and then you'd see the ocean. Now, I realized that like I make this point, like you can go to the ocean and watch the ships sink. It looks like they're sinking. They're really going over the curvature of the Earth. Most flat earthers who don't live at the ocean and witness this think it's a different argument. They think disappearing over the horizon means you can't see them anymore, and they think it's because, well, when things get really far away, you can't see them. So the supposed debunking videos are like, well, we zoom in and then we can see this boat again that you couldn't see because it got too far away. It's like, no, that's not the argument. And then I've taken pictures of this. You take a picture of a sailboat or a really tall, like a 3-masted ship. And if you think back in the past, people would watch the ships come in to shore. So they'd see the ship rising out of the ocean. The ship would rise as it got closer. So you can see this. The ship will look like it's sitting below the horizon, like just the mast of the ship is sticking up over the water. And that's not because it's getting so small you can't see it. It's because it's going over the curvature of the Earth. So I realize a lot of people literally think they're making a different argument than you are because they don't understand what the argument is. Like, this is something you can do yourself. It's very, very easy. Go to the ocean sometime. As if you're ever in LA, you can go down to El Segundo, which is where the beach landing for Captain Marvel was shot. It's El Segundo Beach. Very, very characteristic beach with these rocky barriers that are there to kind of chop up the waves. You can go there and watch the oil tankers disappear because they're really big ships. They're easy to see. But it probably would have been easier back in like the 19th century or the 18th century with those big, tall ships of yore because they were taller than modern ships. But you could do it with cruise ships or something else. Darth Kilhoun says, yeah, I already answered that one. Bloodrock says, I just want to let you know I finally completed the first draft of my novel due to your tutelage. It's not due to my tutelage, it's due to your work. So it's very good. Congratulations. Regarding conspiracies, what do you think about JFK? I think it's highly possible that JFK was killed as part of a conspiracy with Lyndon Baines Johnson. I do have skin in the game in this. Like, full disclosure, LBJ cheated my great-grandfather out of a large sum of money back when it was a really, really gigantic sum of money through basically through a con game where he bought a company, and then got a bankruptcy judge to basically nullify the debt after he sold it off and like hid his assets. LBJ was a notorious crook. So if anyone was gonna perpetrate, a coup, a silent coup, it would be LBJ. LBJ totally would have done. He was absolutely crook, and he did have people voting for him from the grave. So I don't know. And then JFK did say something about like getting rid of the CIA, like scatter it to the winds. So I think it's possible. I don't think it's probable though, right? But the thing about any conspiracy, as far as social proof goes, the more people involved, the less possible it is for the conspiracy to continue, because somebody will spill the beans. Some obvious piece of evidence will get out of the way. The weak point is always people. So if you have 2 people in a conspiracy, it's like a 50% chance of failure versus 1. And it's not really a conspiracy, it's just an action. The more people you bring in, the more chance of failure there is. Ask anybody who's like a hacker, the weak point's always people. I can tell bunches of stories like that. Let's see here. Before I jump all the way back down to the bottom. Is it just me, or are there way too many Star Wars self-parodies or self-referential parodies within the Star Wars franchise? Yeah, I mean it's a pop culture phenomenon. So that if you want to pick a reference that people are going to get, Star Wars is a good one. Like you're gonna have a lot of people understand it. Geekdom says, David, huge fan. Someday we'd like to have you on my podcast. Send me an email, Stu, S-T-U, at dvspress.com, dvspress.com, and I'll get back to you. Maybe we can set something up. The Last Jedi is a parody of Spaceballs. The Last Jedi is a deconstruction. It's not a parody. A parody would indicate that you want it to be funny and you like the original, right? I think conspiracy theories are fun. I love thinking about them. Like another one is like fluoridated water, right? It's like fluoridated water, and they use the it's not reducto ad Hitlerum. There's another argument that it's like Hitler did it, therefore it's bad, right? So any position that Hitler had, it's got to be bad. So it's an argument you use where, Hitler liked the color black too. It's like, whoa, oh no. So did Doc Holliday. Who cares? So did Abraham Lincoln, right? So it's like, oh well, Hitler put fluoride in the drinking water, which I don't actually know if that's true off the top of my head. But people say that and be like, he did it to, therefore there must be some conspiracy to put fluoride in the water. Well, fluoride in the water is not a universal thing. My water's not fluoridated, and it's actually really easy to avoid. So if you believe in fluoridated water, like messing with your mind, you can buy bottled water, or you can run the water through a filter that removes the fluoride. Now, my opposition to fluoridated water is simply that it's an expense and doesn't do anything. It makes the water taste weird if you have enough in it to be bioactive. It's poisonous when you drink it, and it only works to make your teeth stronger as a topical thing. The other thing is, how much tap water do you drink a day? I'm not drinking tap water right now. Like, I'm drinking a Coke, and like all the water I drink is filtered because I don't like my tap water. It's very minerally, but it doesn't have fluoride in it anyway. So your average modern person, are they drinking tap water all the time? Or is there a conspiracy to put fluoride in Coca-Cola? Right? That would be more interesting. That's like Soylent Green. Soylent Green is a great conspiracy movie. So is Logan's Run. But Soylent Green, there's a conspiracy to disguise like what's actually in the ingredients. Like there's a mind control thing in the soda. But that's always an interesting one because people will be like, well, the Nazis did it, therefore this. It's like, well, the Nazis also believed in pensions. Better not collect your Social Security check, guys, because Hitler believed in pensions. Let's see here, Bob. Is Satan a villainous version of Prometheus or vice versa? In the lots of Gnostic things equate the two. Satan is Prometheus. Prometheus is Satan. A lot of black metal stuff equates Prometheus and Satan. I view them as very different characters from different mythologies with different purposes. So Prometheus, Satan in the Christian tradition is more like Satan in Paradise Lost. He really wants the downfall of people. He doesn't want what's best for them, which is why in the Bible, Adam and Eve are in paradise. They begin in paradise, and then through a downfall, they must leave paradise. So if Satan actually cared about the well-being of people, he wouldn't have caused that. So he caused the downfall or took part in it, not because he loved people, but because he hated God. That's the general thought there. Versus Prometheus. So Prometheus in the classic mythological tradition, people don't have fire. So he steals fire from the gods and gives it to people. And the fire could symbolize knowledge, and it is knowledge. But the fire allows people to live without the need to rely on God because they're in a dangerous world. They're not in paradise. So he does it because he loves and cares about people, not because he hates the gods. But of course, the gods punish him for his insolence, and he has a hawk come down and eat his liver every single day as he's chained. So to me, they come from really different perspectives. One is very, and in the Greek tradition, it's like better to be a man than to be a god, because gods are often, besides being not good, they're usually kind of immature because of their immortality. They have nothing to lose. Ash says the mystery plots in the prequels was basically a conspiracy. Yes, it was. And the entire prequels were a big conspiracy. The conspiracy was to create war, which would allow Palpatine to seize power and convert the Republic into what he wanted, which was basically his sole domain. He would be master of creation, and he was successful. And the Jedi really, in their own way, they played into it, because by the time they could stop it, it was too late, and they only helped create sympathy for the devil, in a sense. Do you think the mystery plots hurt the prequels because it made the plot more complicated and possibly more confusing? The short answer is yes. The plots of the prequels, I've said this before, are better than the plots of the original series. They're more complicated, they're more interesting. But the main thing, it would be very roundabout to say that the plots hurt the prequels per se. It's more the combination with the characters. So the characters were just not as likable. They didn't fit into those classic molds that I talk about. There was no everyman, there was no bad boy, there was no paragon. You had a different kind of characters in the prequels. So people were much less attached to the characters. They liked them less. If you had reshot episode 1 and every character had different dialogue and was better, I think people would have really enjoyed it a lot more than they did. I think it really has to do with a lot of little execution elements with the characters, but they made things, they don't fit those big archetypes, so they're less easy to grasp and hold on to. So if you push characterization to the side to have a good plot, or you make the characters kind of subservient to your complicated plot, that can hurt them. So it only hurt them in a kind of a roundabout way, is that the conspiracy, it didn't make it as much about the development of the characters as it was with the original trilogy, or just showing how likable they were. Yeah, they're saying Hitler actually survived and fled to Argentina. I've heard that one. I've heard that one before. It's fun to think about that. Like, I think that would be a great jumping off point for a story. Like somebody, especially if you, if you're from Argentina or you've lived there, you could write a story that takes place in Argentina, and some kids are really into that conspiracy theory, and they figure out that, like, this guy they know is like Hitler's son. I think that would be a lot of fun. Let's see here. Let's jump down here. By the way, if you want my attention, make sure it's at David Stewart. Otherwise, I'll assume you guys are talking to each other, and I won't mention that on the video. What about conspiracies in already fictional settings? Yeah, that would be... There's lots of examples in science fiction and fantasy. Maybe you have a conspiracy. Star Trek 6 involves a conspiracy. That's a great one. Great Star Trek movie. Star Trek 6... They have, somebody cuts, somebody shoots this Klingon ship, and then they murder the ambassador. They frame Kirk and McCoy for it. And so Kirk and McCoy have to go to this prison planet, and the original cast, the Enterprise crew has to go save them, and they figure out that there's conspiracies at the prison, and it was all a conspiracy to stop peace between the Klingons and the Federation of Planets, or whatever, the Federation. It was all a conspiracy to stop peace between them for no other reason than like racial hatred. And even Kirk is like, I have racial hatred towards Klingons because they killed my son. I can never forgive them, but I do the right thing anyway, which is an interesting thing. So sometimes the reasoning behind conspiracy theories doesn't always line up. And in Star Trek VI, it's not the best reasoning, but it's still a great plot. And it's a lot of great character action in it. And it's really a good Star Trek movie. I really enjoyed it. It was a good way to go out on things before Generations. And Generations is actually an underrated Star Trek movie as well. Underrated. George Lucas did say Disney weren't fond of him being involved in the next Star Wars films in an interview with Charles. Oh, yes. He decided to do other things instead. He said they didn't want me around. I said, great. Yeah, why don't you kick out the guy who like created every great franchise of like the 80s? George Lucas has been involved in the creation of more cool and original things than almost anyone that I can think of. Maybe Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, are better than George Lucas as far as creating original things that people really loved. But man, George Lucas is actually has probably a very special imagination for that. Kaku says, ever used that conspiracy was you wanting to believe what you think to be real or using it for escapism? This idea keeps the protagonist from truth for being ignorant of this. Yeah, so that's a cool one that you can use. So if you believe super strongly in a conspiracy, you want to believe it so much that you use it as an escape from a reality that you find oppressive. And that's another thing. So there's an element of escapism, which is that if the world is different, if there's a conspiracy, maybe there's salvation from a fallen world. That's what the possibilities people think. Not necessarily that they need it in their real life, but they kind of want it in a story. Jared says, I won't be on board the remaking the original Star Wars. I wouldn't either, but it's going to happen. It's an inevitability at this point. We've seen the pattern with literally every franchise that has ever come before it, including Star Trek. So it will happen. If they reboot Star Trek, if they can reboot Star Trek, they will reboot Star Wars. It is an inevitability. One thing that might be good to talk about is the difference between conspiracy and mystery. How the two correlate different. So mystery, yeah, that's a great comment from Nitaku. A mystery is, we don't know who done it. We don't know the truth of this matter. A conspiracy involves people actively trying to prevent the truth from coming out. And there's different levels of that, but at the highest level, it would be, restricting knowledge of the nature of reality. That we're hiding the truth that like the president is really a reptile, right? That's the stuff that's super high level conspiracy stuff. But you can have it at any level. The main thing is with a conspiracy, you're trying to hide the truth from a large number of people, and there's usually there's some esoteric knowledge involved, and there's some darker meaning. Like a whodunit, who murdered this person? It's just figuring out the specifics. Versus, nobody knows that there was an orphanage here and that all the orphans got shipped to Abu Dhabi and then became slaves, right? Like, a deeper level conspiracy involves something more than just a criminal trying to avoid punishment, but an active suppression of the truth so that people literally don't know what happened. That's where I look at a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory versus a conspiracy is just a plan, right? You can be guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. It means you're planning to commit murder and you're trying to do it. What if the conspiracy in these recent Star Wars films is that Rey will become the next Sith Lord like Darth Rey? I don't think the movie makers are creative enough to do that. And I don't think they're brave enough to do it. Even though Rian Johnson was pretty brave in destroying Star Wars, in a sense, he wasn't so brave to make Rey just like embrace the dark side. That would have been really interesting. It would have been far more interesting for him to turn Rey into a bad guy and try to turn Kylo into a good guy than to do what he did, which was to turn all the old characters into bad guys. And also, I don't think he could do it because the plot on a technical level was just bonkers and awful. And just wasn't well thought out. Do you think it's easy to make a conspiracy a good thing, like some kind of noble lie? Yeah, I think that, so I wouldn't, the way I would probably frame it is like the people who are executing the conspiracy, like they did in a South Park episode. The 9/11 conspiracy is a conspiracy. So it's like 9/11 conspiracy is a conspiracy? Yeah. It's like, of course it was just a bunch of Muslims. But 1/4 of all Americans are retarded. We have to create something for them to hold on to believe in. So yeah, you could do something like that. Like maybe, why is the nature of the Earth being flat suppressed? The Earth is not flat, but let's pretend it is for this conspiracy theory. Well, maybe it's something that's like you don't want people to know that, like the Earth is decaying away at the edges, like it's falling off. And so eventually the Earth will be destroyed, and you're afraid that would cause like mass murder and panic and chaos because the world is going to end. Like that would be a noble lie with flat Earth. Or just like an asteroid's going to hit the Earth, but we can't tell people because then they would freak out. Like we have to suppress this really horrible truth because the consequence of people knowing it would be too great. So we can't tell people that everybody's going to die in 3 weeks. Yeah, I would watch the sequel trilogy if Rey became a Sith Lord. That's what Alpha Mar says. Yeah, I agree. J.K. Rowling is now just chasing the woke train. Got to transition the entire male cast to the Potter books. Yeah, I know. This is one of the. I mean, it's the most. This replying to Lobster 11 here. This is the most cowardly and dumb thing you can do, which is to create a story where a character's sexuality isn't present in the story, which is the case of Dumbledore, right? And then say after the fact something about it, right? So it's like, oh yeah, Dumbledore was gay. You just say that after the fact. Yeah, he was gay. Everybody give me praise because I have a gay character. It's like he wasn't gay in the story. He didn't have a sexual life in the story. So you only do it after if you actually wanted to be brave, you would have his sexuality be present in a children's story. But I don't think she's that stupid when the book is that popular to put that in there. It would have caused like a major blowback. It would have been like a big no. But of course, people who are LGBT activists really would have wanted her to do that. But the fake wokeness is what gets it. And this will upset people who are, who are LGBT activists. It's like if you really wanted Dumbledore and Grindelwald or whoever to be, quote, passionate lovers, then you would have put that in the script and made people endure this reality of the characters. You would have made them do it. Instead, you didn't. You just come out with it afterwards because you know that there's a certain number of people that'll be like, this is so good. Dumbledore's the major gay character in a children's story. It's like he's not gay in the stories. He's nothing in the stories. He's just an old man. It's like saying Gandalf is gay, Gandalf's not gay. He's not anything, right? Or Frodo's gay. Well, Frodo's not married, but he in no way is having sexual relationship with anyone. It's just it doesn't exist. So when you come up with these things after the fact, it's the most dishonest and cowardly thing. If you were actually brave, you would just put a gay character in your story. But it's kind of proof that a lot of these people, they like to pay lip service to their politics, but they're not courageous enough to put them in a story. Osama bin Laden sank the Titanic. That is all. Now that's another one. It's like, did Osama bin Laden actually get killed because everybody who was on the mission died in a mysterious helicopter crash later? What are they trying to cover up? That'd be a great jump off place for a story. Playing Verdun, a World War I sim while listening to you. You were a battle hymn to settle my nerves. I talk fast, so I'm surprised to hear that, but good to know. Grimaldist. Let's see here. I missed the super chat from Kaku. Thank you. Might as well. Team 4-star bridge, Last Jedi, honk. You know what I think would be interesting if somebody took all the footage of the sequel trilogy and recut it and maybe overdubbed it and made just a different Star Wars movie with it. I actually might watch that. Kind of like the Hobbit fan edit. They're always trying to edit the Hobbit movies back to being like the good story that the book was, and they can never seem to make it happen. Chuck Norris was on the grassy knoll. It's better. Is it better to have the protagonist's efforts stop a conspiracy, or to have their efforts to stop it only be Sisyphean? It's hard to know where my emphasis needs to be in Sisyphean. So in Watchmen, it's like Sisyphus. In The Matrix, it's like Sisyphus, right? Their efforts don't matter. Like what you find out at the end of The Matrix is that the outside of the Matrix was just another layer to appease people who rejected the inner layer. And then in Watchmen, it's like everybody just gives up at the end. Personally, I don't like the end of Watchmen, at least definitely the way the movies did it, or the way the movie did it. I don't like the end of Watchmen for that reason. And a lot of people don't like the end of Matrix for that reason. So it's up to you. I think they both have virtues. It depends how you want to end it. Do you want to end on a low note or a high note? Or some people, you need to end on a low note, like with 1984. 1984, it all just gets revealed that it's all just a big conspiracy to keep people continuing to be in poverty forever so that the party can stay in power forever. Everything's a conspiracy in 1984, and there's no solution, and there's no fixing it. He loves Big Brother. There's a conspiracy theory that Columbus didn't discover America first, it was the Vikings. The Vikings actually discovered North America first, but not the parts of America that we actually know. I don't know who would suppress it, though. So here's the difference between a conspiracy theory and just something wacky and like an idea. A conspiracy theory requires suppression of the truth. So why would someone suppress the truth about the Vikings? I don't think anyone would. It's like, oh, is it so bad that a Spaniard didn't come to North America first? All right, actually, no. Columbus was actually Italian. I'm sorry. He was just financed by the Spanish. It's like, no, it's not bad. Since we were doing Hitler conspiracies, how about the one where he didn't commit suicide and was instead killed by the Russians? That one's less interesting to me because the outcome is the same. Like, what would have happened if he didn't commit suicide? I think it's more interesting if he lived. Like maybe the United States smuggled him out for some reason. What about the conspiracy of the mythic Dawn to assassinate Emperor Uriel Septim VII? Why couldn't we investigate that in Oblivion instead of just jumping through hell portals? I thought you did. You actually do that. Right? Like you infiltrate the mythic Dawn. That's the story, dude. You actually do that. You jump through hell portals because that's one of the setups of the game. But yeah, that actually is the main plot. You meet secretly with them. I'm trying to think who you go with. Barris or someone, he gets killed. It's cool. Do you believe in UFOs? No. I do not believe in UFOs. Short answer is like likelihood is the main thing. Just getting rid of the first of all, the social proof is in like a small number of like anecdotes rather than a large presence. Like lots of people saw a UFO, that would be one thing, right? Or if lots of people literally saw aliens. So why would aliens visit and not reveal themselves? Maybe there's some conspiracy there. Why would aliens be continuing to abduct people randomly? And if they're so technologically superior, like why haven't they enslaved us for our whatever reason? Why are they visiting the Earth? How did they get here? You can't go faster than the speed of light. Or is there some sort of space folding technology? In the infinity of time, human beings with advanced civilization has been, very, very short amount of time. So the likelihood of aliens in the infinite universe having the exact same, having it line up over the last however many millions of years so that they could meet us now and have the technology to travel however great that distance it is, it just seems basically impossibly small. Maybe that's why people like the flat Earth, is it makes things simpler, right? Rather than this giant universe, you have a smaller one. It's just the Earth. You don't have to worry about aliens or things. So I don't really believe in aliens. Life doesn't seem accidental either. I wonder how the prequels would have done if Darth Jar Jar was ever implemented rather than just have him give Palpatine emergency powers. I think that would have been very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things. Could have gone a lot of different interesting ways. Spoiler: Full Metal ended up being about. This is a spoiler for Full Metal Alchemist. The homunculus's father wanting to sacrifice the whole. Oh, that's right. Yeah, he wanted to take all of God's power and knowledge. It's crazy. And it was like making a giant alchemical drawing like out of the entire country. It kept getting higher and higher level. Negelsack says if there's money in something, then someone will do it. Since there's money in rehashing franchises, it will happen all the way towards the big crunch. Do you feel the pain, David? Yeah, I don't care anymore. Like, it's not painful to me because it just doesn't matter. Like, I can disconnect from that. It doesn't hurt me with that they kill Star Wars because Star Wars was never mine to kill. Mother Brain says, I was thinking of more along the lines of Sky Captain in The World of Tomorrow, where a retro-futuristic 1930s-ish world is under attack by a mysterious mad scientist. I love that movie. I don't remember it. I remember it stylistically, but I don't remember the plot at all. I think I watched it one time. Nitaku says, one idea I have is a paranormal conspiracy set in modern day parallel history. Yeah, that's interesting. You could do that. The Earth is not flat, it's hollow and full of hamsters. I believe it's, no one ever does like the hourglass shape. I think it's a hollow sphere facing another sphere with the Aeon Tower in the middle. Are you familiar with the Deus Ex game series? Yes, but I haven't played it since the old one. I didn't play any of the new ones. Why are conspiracy theories considered a right-wing thing now? It's always right-wing conspiracy theorists. Well, they're not just right-wing. I mean, the entire Russiagate thing is a conspiracy theory that the entire media bought into and continues to propagate. And it's actually, there's some learning there because out comes the Mueller report, and the entire Russiagate thing was a giant hoax. Like, it was a conspiracy theory that they promoted. Everyone with sense knew it. But what happens when you're presented with the evidence that you're wrong is rather than changing your mind about something, you double down. SJWs always double down. But it's not just SJWs. Lots of people will double down and instead of taking evidence into consideration will view negatively whoever presents the evidence, right? So there's nothing there. There never was anything there. Russia has never been... Everybody knew that was just a bunch of garbage. It's like, why is Trump letting Mueller do all this? It's like, because there's nothing to find. It was probably just there's no real, the downside is low and the upside is pretty high. So just let him investigate the nothing. He wasted millions of dollars in multiple years to find nothing. Like, if there was anything to find, you think with the entire budget of the government, he would have been able to find something, but he didn't because there's nothing to find. It's a conspiracy theory. Right? It's a left-wing. There's also there's other left-wing conspiracy theories. McCorporations, McCorporations enslaving people, banks, stuff like that. I'm not a fan of banks, but there's banks. There's a lot of left-wing conspiracy theories, but they don't view them as conspiracy theories. They just say stuff. It's about keeping down the proletariat. That's conspiracy theory. JK is so sad. It's so obvious too. Yeah, it's like, so JK Rowling, or people correct me, JK Rowling. If you spend too much time on Twitter, you think Twitter's reality. This is something that I want to caution everybody about it. If you don't spend enough time in the real world talking to real people, you start to think the internet is the real world, that it's a reflection of the way people really are. And so the praise and the love you get on Twitter is real praise and love, even though the people that are on it are mostly robots. Yeah, that's what it is. You just get seduced by it. Same thing with Stephen King. Sorry, super chat from Kaku. Sorry, I missed this. Is there a way to weave conspiracies together through overlaps in ideals, philosophy, and objectives? Does that present itself as a metaphysical conflict? Not necessarily, right? It depends. I don't know. If you could execute it right. So like maybe there's a conspiracy to, maybe there's two groups that have competing conspiracies. Like it'd make a good spy movie. Both of these groups want to do things that, they're allies at this, but then there was a conspiracy to maybe get them together by some other cabal or some other group. It depends. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the easiest way to weave together groups that are both conspiring is to have them have objective aims. So like maybe you have a protagonist who's uncovering a conspiracy, like in a Da Vinci Code style conspiracy, and he comes across somebody else that's doing the same thing, but they're doing it from a different angle or for a different side. Like it's a Russian spy instead of an American spy, and through that he figures out it's not the Russians that are doing this. It's really a different group. If you watch the movie Ronin, it does this a little bit. There's multiple conspiracies. So one is you have one spy, Gregor, I think, is playing the others in a way so that he could steal this case. And we don't know what's in the case. It might be a weapon. It's something important. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they want the case. So he conspires with the Russians to get it. So they know the Russians want it. Meanwhile, a couple of the characters who are originally working for the IRA, you figure out, were never really working for the IRA at all. They were essentially within that IRA conspiracy. Like the group was originally, turns out, it's a conspiracy from the Irish Republican Army, or whatever remains of it. They were never really working for them. They had infiltrated that as a means to gain access to and prevent the Russians and the IRA, or really to gain access to the IRA so that they could take down this boss of the IRA. We were here for your boss the whole time. So Ronin is a great movie to watch that weaves those things together. It's actually one of my favorite movies. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. His name escapes me, but it's a great screenplay to look at as well. Very, very good original screenplay. But that's a great example because the French and American spy in it, Bob and Vincent, they are Sam and Vincent. They're really working for some other means that we don't quite understand. We don't really know why they're doing what they do, other than they work for the good guys, is what we hope, because they're taking down a terrorist. This guy who's basically been ejected from the Irish Republican Army for being too extreme. So they make him like an extra, they make it extra strong. This guy's a bad guy. They do a really good job with it. Versus they were kind of with the IRA. The Russians were against them as well, but they weren't really with the Russians, and they kind of had to fight the Russians, or had to get involved with this Russian conspiracy because it was necessary for them to get to the end goal, which was taking down this bad guy. It's good. It's a great one. Gandalf is gay. Ian McKellen and Frodo is gay. He shares the load. Come on. J.R.R. Tolkien does not agree. I don't think the Maiar have sexuality. They just are. Actually, they do. So, who is it? Thingol marries a Maiar and has children with her. So yeah, they do have sexuality. They are married to each other as well. Producing offspring, not necessarily, but Tolkien does say from the beginning they have the difference between male and female with them. Okay, let me quickly get through these comments, and then I want to have the logic of the day. How much of a creator's personality do you think affects their products? Sometimes I feel like Lucas being this mild-mannered and out-of-touch fruitcake is what gave Star Wars its heart. I don't know. I think it does. I think everything is a thumbprint. If you look at it too much like some technical execution of how everything has to be done a certain way, you'll never have anything original or cool. It's really how you're going to let your quirks come in and which ones you're going to possibly minimize on the way to making something good. But for the most part, it's about doing what you want to do and kind of putting your thumbprint on it, doing it your way. It's doing it your own way is what's going to make it original. It doesn't mean that you throw everything out the window. It just means you have to kind of follow your heart at least a little bit. All the great works have been works of the heart, just to some extent, even if they're technically well executed. Does Men in Black fit into the conspiracy theory category? I think so, but the conspiracy is revealed really early, and the good guys are the perpetrators of the conspiracy. Again, because you don't want, the people can't handle the truth. Bob says investigating the Mythic Dawn before Uriel dies and then failing. That'd be interesting. You could always write a mod that does that. Bob, my favorite conspiracy theory combines aliens and Nazis. The Nazis developed the Wunderwaffen Die Glocke, which we mistake for a UFO when it visits us from the far side of the moon. Interesting. That'd be a good story. Thoughts on child protagonists? I can't decide between making a character 9 to 10 or 13 to 14, especially when there's death war in the stories. An agent or like somebody who's into the industry would tell you child protagonists are for children's stories. And if you are writing for adults, you should have adult protagonists. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Ender's Game basically has a child protagonist. And it works. So there's plenty of counterexamples. I mean, there's counterexamples, but not many. But the conventional wisdom is if it's for adults, you should have adult characters. But don't let that stop you. If you really want the characters to be young, you can do that. It's just your readers, if they're adults, are not going to identify as much with the child unless the child is experiencing something that they experienced at the same time. And then it's not going to be quite the same as like Luke Skywalker or something. All this talk of Flat Earth really makes me want to read Ringworld again. Ringworld's really cool. Ringworld's cool. Also, salty we never got to play as the Pentius Acolytus in Skyrim. I don't remember what that is. Pentius Acolytus. The final eye? I don't know what that means. Haven't read Latin in a while. Did you read the 2 Elder Scrolls books? Nope. They're fun pulp fare. Hopefully they are. Let's see here. And the Thalmor and Skyrim have a conspiracy to end the world. I wasn't quite aware of that. Maybe I missed something though. Do you like the Metal Gear Solid franchise? Haven't played it in 10 years. I liked it back in the day. John David Zeke and David Mamet wrote Ronin. I think I'm remembering the original screenplay by John David Zeke. Yeah, I know you're joking. Would you consider the Redwall series of books to be conspiracy books, with the mice running around the Abbey and covering puzzles? No, I don't know. It's been a long time, though, so I don't know. Thalmor conspiracy theory to end the world by toppling the towers, breaking the wheel, and destroying Talos and Lorkhan to unmake Nirn and return to the Aedra. Oh, yeah. The idea that, like, you're imprisoned in the Mundus. Melian was the Maiar Thingolmeri. That's right. Their child was Luthien, and the only stranded children of the Luvatar that contains part of the Valar and Maiar. That's true. And so Elrond is a descendant of them. So is Aragorn, actually, just further down the line. So when he marries Arwen, he's actually marrying his like great. It's his like his cousin like 24 times removed. Kind of funny. What do you think about Obama and Hillary both using the term Easter worshippers and not Christians? Let's leave that for the noise stream. Do they conspire against Christians? I think that they just it's just you a million little choices. Yeah, they don't want to come out as pro-Christian ever because it's not what their immediate side wants. What do you think of the conspiracies in the Metal Gear Solid franchise? I remember them being okay at the time. One of them was a clone. There was a lot of clone conspiracies back in the day. All right. Okay, let me move on to the last part of the show before I go. This is, weekly logic, weekly fallacies. This isn't really a fallacy. What it is a bias. So this is what I call survivor bias. Survivor bias is something that everyone should be pretty aware of. But it's not something that you often think about because survivor bias affects basically the data that you're taking and the way that you view the truth, like the witnesses of things. So a really simple example, if we're thinking of anything, if you have a bunch of adventurers go out and you have an adventurer come through and he's very rich from adventuring, you think, well, the way to get rich is to be an adventurer and go search dungeons. But you're only seeing the adventurer who didn't die. You're not seeing the 100 others who did die. So there's a survivor bias. So when you see somebody who's very, very successful at a certain business, like maybe he's a really, really successful musician, you think, well, being a rap star is the key. If I want to be rich, I'm going to try being a rap star. When what you don't see is that there's a million other people who did the exact same thing as that person and didn't succeed. So in some cases, you may look at a survivor of a particular gate. So this always occurs where there's a gate where some data is excluded and never seen, and then you're only viewing data on the other side. So there's a gate called people quit, and then you only see the people who are successful. So you think, well, if I'm a big time rapper, I can make some money. I'll go into this. You don't see that there was thousands of other rappers who had the same quality of music, did the same thing, worked just as hard. They didn't make it, maybe because outcomes are random, right? They weren't that black swan. They weren't at the right club at the right time for the right person to hear them, and so they just never hit the success. They were Anvil instead of Metallica. So the survivor bias misses that. It's like, why is Motley Crue popular? Well, they showed up to gigs and they were losers enough that they could always exploit optionality and show up to gigs. And all the other bands that showed up to gigs, they didn't have like one song that somebody at a record, some record producer liked. It wasn't because they were worse musicians or they didn't have the look or they didn't work as hard. It's simply just it's luck. It's a great example. Kaku wants one more super chat. Thoughts on the Minority Report conspiracy? I like Minority Report a lot, both the Philip K. Dick story and the movie. Actually, I like the movie a lot. So the conspiracy is that precognition doesn't explicitly show the future. That's the conspiracy. They want to suppress it because of a variety of reasons. It has been effective, but they've undoubtedly imprisoned people who wouldn't have done what they were imprisoned for doing. And from there springs everything else. As you uncover the truth of that, there's another conspiracy to stop that. You incriminate the main character. He ends up on the run. He starts to discover more of the truth of his job, which he had faith in. He loses faith in the reality that he had been presented with and has to understand a new reality, that there's dissenting opinions within the precogs on what is actually going to happen in the future, and those things are suppressed, meaning there's people who are put in prison who didn't do it. And the main character has to directly confront that with the idea that I'm going to commit a murder in the future, but I don't believe I would. So anyway, it's very well executed. It's very well done. And then there's a great reveal of who the main conspirer is and what his goal is, and there's some great twists at the end. So I definitely like it. I think it's a hit too. It's great. Now, I did write an article a while back on future crime. Future crime is a category. Future crime is a category of crime that we create, where basically we punish someone for doing something that creates some future hazardous situation, some potential bad action, rather than actually doing something bad itself. A really good example is actually drunk driving. So when you drive drunk, that is, you're creating a hazardous situation. Now, there's nothing for sure to say that you're going to crash into somebody and kill someone if you drive drunk. But through the nature of being drunk, that's increasing the possibility of that happening. Therefore, it's a type of future crime. There's more intense future crimes too, right? Like imagine you lock somebody up for, I don't know, maybe you make, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of like a really, really good example of future crime. Drunk driving is a good one. And it's not saying that you shouldn't have laws against, say, driving drunk, but maybe it's alcohol, right? Like alcohol itself is not bad. But you may have a dry county because you believe alcohol makes people bad. Therefore, if somebody gets alcohol in your county, you put them in jail. Now, you haven't put them in jail for them doing anything bad, right? Or you do this with drug prohibition, right? You haven't put them in jail for doing anything bad. Like they haven't hurt another person. They've just possessed the substance. But you put them in jail to deter other people from getting that substance. You put them in jail because in the future they could hurt someone with that substance. Gun control's the same. There's a lot of categories of crime that are technically future crime. We put people in jail when they haven't done anything to hurt another person ever, but because they might in the future because of some condition that we think is hazardous or bad. Okay, so back to my logic, right? Survivor bias. Turns out that survivor bias is everywhere, and you can actually find it located in all sorts of different things where you don't think about it. The classic example is, the Army Air Corps back in World War II took a survey of where all their bombers were coming back with bullet holes where they've been shot. And so originally they're like, well, this is where the concentration of bullets are on the ship. We should reinforce those with armor. And a statistician was like, no. You should reinforce all the places that they weren't hit, because those places where they weren't hit, that's actually a plane was hit there and crashed. So the places where there's holes is where the plane can get hit and make it back and survive. So what you're not seeing is the data of who dies. The plane that crashes got hit in those spots where there was no damage. So you need to reinforce the spots where there was no damage. It's a good example of this. Turns out that this survivorship bias happens a lot with things like, approving drugs. If you read about the approval, how Prozac was approved, people dropped out of the trial because the side effects were incredibly severe. And so what happens is you have people in a drug trial, somebody drops, let's say you have to take the drug for 6 weeks. 3 weeks in, the side effects are so severe, you drop out. Now, that doesn't count as anything. Instead, that person who drops out is excluded from the data set. So what you end up with, comparing, good effects to bad effects or effective to placebo, is the survivors, the people who didn't drop out of the trial because of negative side effects or because of some other reason. So you have a survivorship bias. And so this is one of the reasons that side effects are often worse than they're made out to be, because people who experience severe side effects of a drug drop out of drug trials and aren't counted. They aren't counted in the data. So if you end up taking like a statin drug and you have severe side effects, that's part of it. The other reason is because they give those to severely ill people, and then they think that that's going to transfer through the marginal. I talk about arguing from the margins. They think good for ill people, therefore good for non-ill people, and that's not necessarily the case. So somebody drops out, they're excluded. So lots of people take drugs and get severe side effects, and they're like, I must be that 1% who got the negative side effect. It's like, probably those negative side effects are more common than you think because of survivorship bias. There's some other, there's lots of other things that you will see survivorship bias with. It's anything where there's a gate where you don't see the data. Another good example is anything that involves crime prevention. We mentioned future crime and Minority Report. If you talk about other policies which are intended to prevent crime on some level, let's use child sex offender registries, because there's a group of people that really want to do away with sex offender registries here in the United States. And the justifications they use for getting rid of it, I usually can poke a bunch of holes in, because they're constructed by people who don't understand statistics, and survivorship bias is one. So if somebody knows that there's a sex offender in his neighborhood and he alters his actions in some way, or he's just aware of it, and that prevents him from allowing his child to have contact with that person in the future, when in an alternate universe where there was no registry, he wouldn't have known. he prevents a crime, that crime is invisible. The child survived. He hasn't had a crime perpetrated against him or her. So given that survivorship bias, people infer that sex offender registries are not effective because you literally cannot see their effect. You can't see what you've prevented. You don't have an alternate universe to test what the effect would have been, nor would it be ethical to subject one sample of the population to sex offenders to see what happened, right? Like that would not be ethical to do. So that's a really, really good example. There's also survivorship bias in everything leading up to sex offender registry because of all the different gates that happen that alter the data. So here in California, there's data to suggest child molesters of male victims. So these are molesters who molest boys, have a 50% recidivism rate, which means they are arrested they go back to jail, at least arrested, if not, I think they actually have to be convicted. They're convicted. 50% of them after they get out of jail are convicted of the same crime. They commit at an extremely high rate. They recommit the same crime. So with that in mind, it's like, well, we'll create a sex offender registry and we'll give people information, because we can't, can you keep someone locked up forever? You have this idea that, you can't give people life for crimes that aren't murder or things like that. So you set that up. What are you supposed to do with that information? What about the ones who got away with it, right? How many of them got away with it and they're invisible? So some part of the 50% that, quote, didn't do, never recommitted a crime, just were never caught. So there's a gate called being caught. And if you don't pass the gate called being caught, the data is invisible. So there was probably many more people who, committed crimes and just were never caught again, because there's lots of things that have to happen for them to get caught. And a lot of times the crimes go unreported. Or just this is a side way that a lot of the opponents of sex offender registries don't understand. In fact, they do arguing from the margins, which I'll talk about in a second. But one of the things they don't understand is that they're like, well, the majority of molestation cases are from first-time offenders. Therefore, having sex offender registries is not effective. It's like, well, no, because the sex offender registry is a category of people that committed at a higher, if they have a 50% rate, 50% of the general population is not molesting children. It's like virtually none of them are, right? So the fact that the majority of convictions are from first-time offenders doesn't mean anything, because you're excluding this. You're arguing against the margins. Then they argue for the margins too, which is they say things like, oh, well, somebody so-and-so ended up on a sex offender registry because he got caught urinating in public. It's like, okay, well, maybe urinating in public shouldn't put you on the sex offender registry. Maybe we alter that. It's like, well, then there should be no sex offender registries, and they're unjust because somebody ended up on the sex offender registry who probably shouldn't have. My favorite is when someone ends up on the sex offender registry for a crime they didn't commit, which is like they plead to a lesser charge, but they end up on the sex offender registry for 20 years instead of 10 based on the original charge that they were arrested for. It's like, well, they're still like a child molester. They're still a sex offender, and you're just arguing that they have to spend too much time on the list based on how they ended up with the plea bargain, right? Things like this. Does this apply to guns preventing crimes? Jonathan Nichols says. Yeah, same thing, right? Like if somebody doesn't go into a house because they know that there might be a gun there, then the crime never happens. It's like it doesn't exist. It might also just be moved into a different crime. Instead of somebody doing a home invasion robbery, they just break into my car and steal my stereo. It ends up as a lesser crime. And that's a hard one. That's a very hard one to track. Film Girl. Sorry, missed any chats you had. If you wanted to include a conspiracy theory in your story, can you have one without it being overly complicated? Not to confuse the audience too much. Yeah. Something simple works, right? You don't have to have it be really, really complicated. It could be really simple, like, we're hiding the fact that the president has a secret wife, right? My laptop's playing up, so I had to use my phone. Sorry. It happens. But that's what's cool. You can use a phone. It's magic. They gave Ross Ulbricht life for making a website. Yes. So that's an interesting one from Unicorn on the Cob. Ross Ulbricht He created Silk Road, which was a website that people used to trade like Bitcoin for drugs and mail drugs and hire hitmen and do all kinds of other weird stuff. Gave him life in prison for like facilitating that. It's nonsense, right? I could maybe see some jail time because it's like pretty explicit that he could do that. But if you just create a platform and don't manage it, like what responsibility do you have? You know, if I build a shopping market and two people buy drugs in the parking lot, am I responsible for that? Because I built a place for them to exchange drugs? I don't think I am. But the question is, how far does that argument apply? I think it's really like a matter of resources. The government has infinite resources. If they can't get a conviction, chances are they didn't do it. You know. Did anyone mention that the destruction of the Death Star was an inside job? It kind of was, when you think about it. The engineer who designed it, you know, in Rogue One, wanted the flaw to get out and do it. Anyway, so survivorship bias is a big one, and you'll see it a lot with a lot of different things. And once you're sensitive to it, you pick up on it quite a bit more than you would otherwise. And a lot of arguments stop holding water. And you need to be more skeptical about like the effectiveness of drugs and things because of survivorship bias, and also what people say you ought to do in order to be successful, right? Because with something that has a small like black swan like bit of success, doing what that person did, there's no reason to believe that it'll help. So that's something to watch out for. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. It just means that you can't expect success from it. What's a good showcase of a protagonist becoming a villain due to a conspiracy? Prequels. Star Wars prequels. Film Girl. Thank you. Hope you and your family are doing well. We're doing great. I'm glad I caught the stream this week. I was working the midnight showing of Endgame. I finished it too. Yeah, I got to go see that tomorrow because I know people want me to see it. You know. So I'll leave the baby at home and I'll go see it and give a review. I'm not feeling good about it based on the first one. Like I just have this tickle in my ghost, I guess. You know, it's Ghost in the Shell. I got this whisper in my ghost that it's going to be the last Jedi of Marvel movies. I just got a feeling it is. Like my expectations aren't high after the first one. The first one was okay, even though it was like a bonkers reasoning. I kind of forgave it that. And it was kind of schizophrenic as far as its entire construction. I'm expecting that this one will end up being like bad, but we'll see. We'll see. And I'll do a no spoiler review. I still didn't do like a spoiler review of Captain Marvel, I realized, but I did like 3 videos on it, so who cares? Government builds roads. Bank robbers use those roads to make a getaway. Arrested all government for aiding criminals. Right? Yeah. How far do you want to take the argument that if you create something, same thing with, I think was it Mega Upload? Is that it? I'm trying to remember. The guy from New Zealand, he had a website, and the U.S. government's trying to get him because people would put copyrighted material on his website and use it to share it with each other. That therefore, you know, he should go to jail. Not just get sued for money, but like he should go to jail for allowing people to infringe copyright using his platform. No one from YouTube goes to jail. It's ridiculous. Who am I thinking of? I don't remember who I'm thinking of. But he hasn't gotten extradited just yet. So anyway, I will probably end it there. Kim.com with Mega. Yes, Mega Upload. That's right, Kim.com. So I'm probably going to end this here. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't seen it. You can check out my books. Muramasa Blood Drinker. I don't promote this one as much. This is my samurai fiction one. There is a conspiracy in this one. Several conspiracies, actually, and so you might like that one. This is the first edition cover. So if you like the first edition cover other than the dark red and black one, please let me know. This was a cover I designed quickly on the cheap to get the book out, and a lot of people really like it because that striking red and white kind of looks cool, and then there's some like cherry blossoms on the back. If you want me to bring back the first edition, let me know. I have some first edition paperbacks I'll probably give away Maybe on a future stream I'll do a giveaway for some of the original paperbacks. Crown of Sight, this one came out almost a month ago, right a couple days before my daughter was born. This is a 2-hour read, so you can skip the movies, guys, and read Crown of Sight, which is a very, very fun one involving very few humans, mostly elves and other weird races. And it's about a battle siege and some magic and the nature of reality and the nature of history and the nature of truth and the nature of memory, all of which are interesting topics. And Water of Awakening, you can get this one for free if you're on my mailing list for a little while, so dbspress.com/list. This is the first book in the Eternal Dream saga. Second one is Needle Ash, and most of you guys have that one too. So I'll see you guys later. Oh, last bits, any kind of stuff. Thanks for the stream. Thank you. Thoughts on Game of Thrones? I know you don't follow the series. I'll leave that to like another one. I'm just not interested in it. I would say I'd rather read 50 minutes of books and watch 10 minutes of pornography if I was going to. I'll talk about that with like how titillation works, how to make people titillated with whatever you're doing. I prefer not to do that, but I know I've studied it, so I have an idea of how it works. All right. So thanks so much for watching. Oh, Louis Rossman. I love him. You know, I need to do a show with Louis Rossman. Because I think he would just be so interesting to talk to for a while. He has like a hard blink that I notice. Anyway, sorry. If he watches that, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make fun of you, but I still would love to have him on sometime. All right, I'll see you guys later, and you guys have a great, great day.